welcome to episode 10 of the Aha Moment podcast. I am your co-host. Obviously, my other co-host, Elizabeth Spola, not with us today. But my name's Amanda Kaczurka. I've been with the Decision Associates team for just about 5 years, and I'm very excited to be here with another episode of the Aha Moment, joined today by two wonderful guests from our team here at DA. We have Bill Greenleaf and Terry Cascioli. So I'd love for both of you to just introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your role here.
Sure. My name is Bill Greenleaf, and I'm one of the executive consultants here at Decision Associates, and I'm primarily involved in sales consultation projects. I have, over 35 years experience in sales management, sales leadership. Almost, I'd say about 95% of that has been in manufacturing. And so I like to bring my expertise from my experiences to help DA's customers with their sales and sales leadership challenges.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Terry.
I'm Terry Cascioli. I've been with Decision Associates now for almost 5 years. Like Bill, I'm an executive consultant. I work primarily in strategy, succession, and sales work. Cut my teeth in the sales world. I've managed sales teams in the media industry for over 30 years, designing teams, supporting teams, really all the way through, not just the sales function, but everything that would surround them to make it easier for them to get their job done. And then led more to executive positions later in my career. Like Bill, we help clients across all aspects of their sales challenges.
Yeah, perfect. So if you haven't guessed by now, we are talking about sales today. And so just a few things that we want to go through to really help our listeners get a better sense of how they can make their sales teams more effective, more impactful. So that's going to be the focus of today. And so our aha moment for the episode is that sales strategy isn't just about the activity component. There's so much more to, just get out there and make sales calls. There's so much that has to happen behind the scenes before, during, and after to make sure that that team is really strong, really effective. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So a little bit to kick us off, as far as self-awareness of the sales team members, and I would also argue the supervisor of the sales teams, right? So talk a little bit about the importance of understanding and having that level of self-awareness as you go into a sales process.
I'll kind of, and Bill can get a little more specific into the types, but so backing up a second, one of the things we're really focused on here is sales is a function that we describe often as a funnel. And the purpose here is that bottom end of the funnel. Mm-hmm. So when you have employees in a sales team, we're not really talking about the marketing functions and the interest development. Mm-hmm. We're talking about how to get something to a close. And closure is a skill where personality and personality type is really a big indicator of whether I'm going to be successful at that. There's a comfort in the ask that has to be present within the individuals that you're positioning to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, there are products and services that are across the board in complication, right? Am I selling a solution? Am I positioning a product? All these different, how technical is the aspect. Mm-hmm. So do I have to have an engineering background to do this, which is often the case in Bill's previous industry? What do I need to know? And sometimes it creates these hybrid situations that are very difficult to find, where I've got to have the product knowledge that is so far, into the left brain stuff that the right brain stuff just isn't there. And I really struggle to find the right person. So structure and how you support that is critical, but also understanding who you're looking for is critical in that process. And there's some tools that we use that Bill, if you want to explain those a little bit deeper.
Yeah, we use the predictive index, which I know you're very familiar
Yes.
with, Amanda, and that can kind of help also both. It helps the manager as far as providing some insight into the behavioral and cognitive makeup of their sales team, both individuals and as the team itself relates to one another, and helps provide some coaching and learning guidance as well. But it can also help when in a hiring scenario where we can really map out the what would be the ideal fit for this sort of a sales scenario, this sales role, and either look at previous predictive indexes that have been done on really successful salespeople already on the team, and use that as a guide for us when we're interviewing people, and provide some input from predictive index on those candidates as well. Compare those, and so we found that tools like that are invaluable. And I wish in my career I had access to a tool like the predictive index, because many times you're working with people and you're trying to get them to a certain point in performance. And in my case, as Terry mentioned, I was dealing with some very technical sales, so I needed people with a really, really high technical background. But I also needed people with the right personality to engage people across the spectrum. And so it was really, how do you get there? Do you hire someone that has the great technical skills and coach them up and hope that they're able to have the sales acumen to get the project closed? Or do you find someone that's really good at a selling scenario, and you try and provide them with the technical background to get them there? And sometimes you don't have a choice, depending upon the candidate tool or the makeup of the team that you have and the markets you're trying to penetrate, if they're overseas or domestic. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. So having some insight into the behavioral and cognitive background of a person is very, very helpful when making those decisions.
Yeah, and I would say, that's one thing that I really like about how we approach projects, is taking that behavioral basis, and we like to say we're equipping people with their people data to help them make better decisions about the people that are in certain roles, the work that they do, the teams that they're on, the roles that they play. And so having, to your point, Bill, that behavioral data from which to identify those best fit folks on the team or the candidates that are coming in from outside, really invaluable.
Yeah,
it is.
It is. And it's so accurate. I remember when I first looked at my own predictive index report, I was really, at first I was like, no, that can't be right. And I thought about it and I'm like, oh
wait.
That explains so much about myself. And so it's actually helped me in the years since we did that, for me to actually understand more about myself so that I can improve my own performance with, in the role that I have now.
Definitely. Yeah. Well said. All right. So we also want to make sure that we're selling to the right people, right? That's kind of a crucial component to the sales process. So talk a little bit about, how do you go about identifying who you're selling to, making sure it's the right audience, the right individuals within the organization that you're selling to? How do you go through that process of finding the right people?
Finding fit, finding customer. Unless we're in a very unique situation of we're a startup and we have zero customers, right? The best data points are within our own book of business. Who are our best customers? Why are they our best customers? Are we positioned? Are we a vendor or are we a partner? Ask yourself that question and evaluate the partner clients, right? The ones that really value what you bring to the table. And I think that's a really important distinction, because a lot of times we focus on the product, right? The things that we engineered, that we developed, and we want to talk about us. But our partner clients, we have a relationship with them where sales is used in its best light as a force multiplier, right? It becomes less about the product and the application of that product. And if you look at model sales organizations really across the spectrum, some of the best ones don't do a product.
Yeah.
A Microsoft vendor, for example, a company like Microsoft has tremendous engineering, right? And can create these amazing things, but they're so complex that the application of those products is beyond what they tool up to do. So you've got this industry of solution architects that go in, understand what's the best application of these tools, and it might be 10% of a product's capability, but it's the 10%. It's the critical 10%. So you've got to build your sales teams as force multipliers, not product peddlers. And understand, and you'll find that out through those partner companies, because they're not looking at, boy, this is just the best mousetrap I've ever had. Maybe that's there, but in most cases, it's the other things that you do where you've created this exponential advantage of your product by understanding what it is they're really after, right? That, these things all tie together. So the stuff that we were talking about before, how do I find this right person? They zero in on that stuff, and they use the resources within their own organizations to get to those, to be the architect of a solution and apply product in a way that if I leave you, I leave them.
Right.
And it differentiates you in a way that makes it really hard for competitors to price gouge you.
Sure. So is there merit, Bill, I would pose this question to you, is there merit to, once you've identified who those partner customers are, to having a conversation with them and understanding a little bit more about why they view you as a partner and kind of what that journey has looked like for them? How would you go about having a conversation like that?
Absolutely, especially if it is a significant customer for you, for your company. I would always have annual reviews with key accounts. So I would want to just ask them, how are things going? If we're providing a service, how's the service performing for you? If it's a product, how are our deliveries? How's our quality going? How have we provided value for you? In my previous role, one of the ways that we really could identify value was in the form of cost savings. So how are we providing cost savings for that company could be tracked a number of different ways. And the way that we track it or would like to track it may not be the way that they like to track it, right? So I'd always want to find out what's their language, how do they perceive value, and then I would try and make sure that we were addressing those issues throughout the year. And you do that through conversations, like how have we performed for you? Well, you could have done this, or well, we were kind of disappointed in that. Okay, then let me see if we can improve upon that.
Sure.
But Terry's right. And when you find the ideal customer for your company, you want to try and make sure that you understand why there's that symbiotic relationship. And you want to then seek other organizations that have those same attributes, whether they be revenue, whether they be, similar pain points, whether they be, a certain industry or product or whatever that fit is. And you want to then seek those out, because one of the greatest probably resource a sales organization has is its time.
Sure. And
you can waste so much time by just picking the wrong targets and without moving with intention within a customer's sphere. And you can lose customers very quickly by not paying attention to what matters to them. So that relationship has to be constantly maintained and grown.
Sure. And I think there's merit to understanding. So, if there was a particular challenge that you solved for them, understanding what the challenge was and the language around what other organizations might be saying to talk about that particular type of challenge. So it makes them easier to market to, find. You've got some insight now into keywords that you can, start to monetize and understand, from a marketing perspective, how you find folks that are having the same sorts of struggles.
Absolutely. And I would also say there's a danger too with your ideal customer, and that's arrogance, your own arrogance. When you maybe have a win and a great relationship and you think, oh, wow, they're going to hang with us forever. And remember that thing we did 2 years ago for you that it was really great,
Yeah.
and that doesn't help them today.
I don't think I think so.
You've got to be of value to them today
Sure.
and tomorrow, and looking forward to what are their needs down the road in order to still be relevant and expect to maintain that relationship.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mapping the journey. So understanding the customer journey is really important. Terry, you brought up the funnel at the beginning of the episode. So understanding what that process looks like. Sometimes there are breakdowns in the process, so those have to be addressed. But talk a little bit about how you craft that customer journey and how you make those tweaks on the fly when things don't go as expected.
Yeah, this is actually one of the first things that you should do. Because the client experience is more than just the connection with the sales team, right? It goes from the decision to do business with you to the implementation of the solution, the time between those things, and how many other people are going to touch this along the way. So one of the things I tell a lot of people is paperclip yourself to a sale and see where you go.
Yeah.
And how many people are actually responsible for the true sales process, because it's not done until satisfaction is complete and these annual reviews take place and they're happy. And identifying the type of salesperson you need. We talked about that, the technical challenges. Am I looking for a unicorn because I don't have systems on the back end of this thing to get the customer through the journey?
Right.
And I put so much responsibility on the salesperson that they can't be that technical and they can't be that investigative and they can't be that that's where PI can tell you at the beginning, what you're looking for doesn't exist. We might find, we're looking for needles in a haystack. You've got a sales structure issue or a sales process structure issue that needs to be supported through how does customer service, how do the implementation teams, who am I bringing in to bring this promise to reality? Because that's the sales challenge is, I'm going to make a promise to solve this problem, and it's going to be done like this. And that's that journey mapping that's so critical for you to understand when you build this process, to make sure that you do not have gaps along the way, because it only takes one break in the promise to ruin your reputation.
Right.
It's great, but they said they'd do it in 6 months and it took a year. Or they said it would do this, or that I'm over featured on this, it bogs everything. All of those kind of things is where you've got to make sure that everybody that touches it understands the promise, lives by the promise, and adapts your solution, your product, whatever it is, to fulfill that promise.
Yeah. And I liked what you said about, kind of having someone follow the sales process. We talk in hiring all the time about, kind of secret shopping your hiring process. And I think doing the same kind of activity with your sales process makes a lot of sense, because it helps you from a customer perspective, and even better if you can get somebody who's not intimately familiar with the company, the product, the service, to do that process and speak about their feedback and their experience, because then you're getting somebody who, isn't going to kind of fill in the gaps that may exist just with their own knowledge of what the product or the service is. So I think there's a lot of value in having somebody go through that exercise and provide the feedback of, hey, what does this experience look like? Is it the experience that we think we're delivering on and that we want to be delivering on? Is it consistent? So I like that.
I worked with a manufacturer not too long ago that was having issues with their sales team. It was just sales being dropped that should have gone through, and just some sporadic problems. And I just asked to start looking at communications with customers, and I noticed that when it got to their department, their customer service engineering department that was sending out quotations. at times, depending upon certain representatives sending those quotes out, would be just like, here's your quote, and just very, very terse, brusque sort of language. And others would be like, thank you so much for the opportunity to send a quote. So it wasn't really in the sales team. The sales team wasn't responsible for sending quotes out. It was the customer service team that had that point of contact. But it was overlooked. They would never have been provided any sort of training. They didn't have any procedures on how to, how to send a quote to a customer and be polite. There's no consistency to it. And so, we found that is most likely where there was a lot of breakdown in just a good, positive customer experience. So after providing some training and backing them up on their diplomacy skills and et cetera, there was a reduction in a lot of these just, sail nowhere. So it is a team effort in most organizations, but a lot of companies just get this myopic tunnel vision that, well, it's just a sales team.
Right.
Well, no, it's what's the customer experience? It's the company entirety providing that you need to look at.
Yeah, and to also go back to something you said previously about not making assumptions, I think that applies here too, right? And not making assumptions about what your team does and doesn't know and what they do or don't need to be trained on. I think in the interest of just consistency and making sure everybody's on the same page, operating from the understanding of, I'm not going to assume that they know how I want this to be done or how this should be done. So we're going to train everybody and make sure that it's consistent.
Yeah. Listen to your internal indicators as well. We talked about understanding the client perspective. If you're the GM and customer service is constantly in your office complaining about sales over promising, or finance is constantly in your office saying, we didn't, this isn't going to bill right, or they didn't charge this right, or all those are indicators that you have not mapped the journey right. Right. There's a breakdown in connection where these departments are not on the same page. And every one of those complaints is a client complaint. Even though you're hearing it from customer service, they're hearing it from somewhere. They're about to not deliver on time, or there's something that's breaking down along the value equation that sales said would happen. That's probably not going to. It's either not going to get done in time, not going to get billed right, any number of things. Those internal indicators are a place for you to jump in between and say, okay, where are we missing our connections here?
Sure.
Do I not have enough structure around the sales process up front? Are the passovers not connecting right? Do I need sales to make connections between service and the client together in a room? How do I introduce the team and where the passovers and pass-throughs are going to be? All of those things. So listen to the client, but listen to your teams when they go in and start to point fingers at each other. That
it's a good indicator.
It may not be the fault of the person they're pointing a finger at. It may be your fault for not having the right process and structure in place to get those pass-throughs complete.
Sure. And I think going through the exercise of that kind of secret shopping your process, that's not something you should just do once and then never again. Like that's a repetitive activity, right? Because as team members change, as products and services change, the process is going to change. So making sure that you're staying consistent with secret shopping your process and really taking a close look.
It's help you design your training programs.
Exactly.
At all levels. So when I bring a customer service person in, what do they need to know about the departments on either end of where they touch it? And how do I interact with them?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Walk in the shoes of your customer.
Yes. Said concisely. I love that. Yep, for sure. So we talked a little bit about people data at the beginning of the episode. So now I want to talk a little bit more about creating goals, systems, grounding your sales strategy. So not just the people portion, that's important, but the actual strategy in data as well. So can you talk about how somebody might go about doing that?
Well, there are a lot of ways of doing that. I think one thing that you need to remember at the outset is that if you're setting goals for your sales team, what are those goals going to be based on? And what systems are you going to put in place to monitor those goals that are setting the right sort of behavior activities for your sales team.
Mm.
And I'll give you an example. So I know some companies I've worked with, they'll have like a target for number of quotations for a given cycle, right? Whether it be per week, per month, per quarter. And they think, well, that's how we're going to drive sales activities. We're going to set, you got to have X number of quotes. And then you start looking at the quotes because your average salesperson is going to be like, all right, I can do quote,
Yeah.
but I'll quote everything under the sun
Right.
that this company can do for any customer out there that wants to listen to me, just so I hit that target. So the type of behavior you're putting in place is just, it's based in data, right? You're tracking a behavior, but you're creating an action that you don't want. You want someone quoting having a quote for the right customer, the right product, the right time, that type of thing. So when setting your systems up based on data, you really need to start by looking at, okay, what is my outcome I want to have for my team? What is the goal I need to meet for my company? Is it a revenue goal? Is it a margin goal? What is and then what systems am I going to put into place to help not just monitor progress towards those goals, but motivate my team to the right behaviors in achieving them?
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be widely different depending upon the market you're going after, depending upon the type of sale that is involved, the team that you have, the teams that you're talking to, whether you're going in at the C-suite level or you're going down at the shop floor level.
Mm-hmm.
And all those things are gonna create a different sort of selling systems.
Mm-hmm.
But I firmly am one to believe that you need to have some data, and you need to have two basic types. You need to have objective data, okay, whether it be revenue targets or just what is the objective performance that your team is bringing. And then you need to have that subjective data that you need to be having your salespeople reporting their progress themselves as well. On their activities, on their pipeline progress, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by having both, you're creating a sense of responsibility, accountability, and everybody's looking at the same metrics.
Mm-hmm. So something that I think we hear a lot as it relates to sales is that argument between quantity or quality.
Mm-hmm.
So what would your advice be to an organization that's kind of struggling to figure out? So, okay, well, we're out there focused on quantity and we're really focused on let's make as many calls as we can. And eventually we're going to start striking versus focused on, fewer calls, but let's make sure they're really high quality. So what does that balance look like?
Dialing and smiling.
Yeah.
Data is a common language,
mm-hmm.
and you have to have a common language, right? When Bill talked about goals and expectations, they have to pass these reasonability tests, right? And so as you build these data points, ratios tell you everything. So to answer your question, what is when you look at the successful people on your staff, what are their ratios?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have a smile a dial person over here whose activity is off the charts, but results aren't there, or they're constantly churning business, or they frustrate the organization because of the turnover and the unhappy, unsatisfied vendor mentality of the people that they sell? Are they price sellers? All of those, when you have these data points that you look at and you measure them across the team, they become your common language.
Mm-hmm.
They're also a good bridge between, a lot of our clients are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs have an invention characteristic about them, and they love what they've invented, right? Sales is the language of the application of my invention. Does it really do all the things the inventor thought it would do?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it need to be tweaked, or this was over-engineered, and this is really what's sticky and makes it work, right? And those data points are the common language. So if you're frustrated with what your sales department is telling you about what your expectations are,
mm-hmm.
you're not looking at common data points. You're speaking Latin, they're speaking Hebrew. It's metrics. And when you agree on metrics, expectations are reasonable, goals are accurate, incentive systems can be really powerful because you can drive to a success rate that's stretched appropriately.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Incentive compensation is such a big thing that most companies do not get right. Because again, you can set a compensation, reward on a goal that's going to reinforce maybe bad behavior. And you want to make sure that your compensation programs are aligned with, again, the ultimate goal of your sales team. And you want to do so in a way that is not complicated. A sales professional should be able to calculate where they're at in their incentive compensation program as they walk from their office to their car, right? They shouldn't need to pull out their computer and have multiple spreadsheets to try and figure that out, because then you probably have an overly complex system that maybe isn't set up for, mutual gain.
Right. And is it really rewarding the behaviors that you want it to be rewarding?
Exactly.
Right. That makes sense. So action items. Let's talk about, we've shared a lot of really good information. So how do we help the listeners really understand and identify, what do they do with all this? Where do they start? What do next steps look like? How do I make my sales team more effective?
I'll go back to what we said earlier. Look at your internal, what are the complaints department, have I paperclip myself to the process? Do I really understand where my product fits in a marketplace? Who are my partners? Where am I a vendor? Remember, every organization you deal with has essentially three things that they're focused on. Their core competencies, their critical activities, and then over here, they're non-critical. In most cases, you're either a critical component or a critical activity for somebody who's focused on their core competency. When you can position yourself that way, you're the partner. So really break it down into, what do I do for them that they couldn't do themselves, or they're better off with a partner than they are doing it themselves. There's a lot of industries, huge industries like that. Transportation, for example. Anybody can buy a truck.
Right.
The truck and the trailer are they're not the answer here, right? We know they're the invention that gets it from point A to point B, but the skill to do that, and do I want to take on this critical activity of product movement, or do I find a partner that I can rely on? And remember that as a partner in that kind of a business, you have customer contact, right?
Yeah.
Your people are the ones sitting on the dock, not theirs. So the experience that your folks have, not just playing into your chain of customer satisfaction, but your client's chain.
Right.
So you really need to understand what you do and what has value to the people that you're partnering with. And am I set up to mirror the value that they're trying to deliver if I'm that kind of an activity? Or do I create such efficiency and cost savings or whatever in their process that I'm an indispensable partner, and my engineering expertise or all of that, my product is what it is because I know what they're trying to accomplish.
Right.
We don't invent in vacuums. We invent with purpose, right? And that purpose is usually what the client is trying to accomplish. So really get market focused. If you don't understand what's going on, goes back to goal setting as well. A lot of the issues of bad compensation plans come from, do I understand if you see a lot of bad ones in high growth segments, right? Because it's just booming,
right? And
salespeople can deliver numbers without even, the phone rings, right? I'm just following up on, everybody's calling me because, man, our mousetrap is killing it right now. Are you gaining market share? Or are you just coasting along in a growth segment and actually losing your position as a market leader what is it you want, right?
Yeah.
You want to be best in breed. You want to be a market leader. You better know what's going on in your segment and how to apply that with your expectations across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta start from the market back to you.
Gives it more stickiness,
Yes.
I think, if you approach it that way, for sure. What are your thoughts, Bill?
Well, I was just thinking what Terry was saying there. We've had experience with customers in that scenario that they think they're doing fantastic, and then you do a market survey, market assessment, and you realize that their competitors are growing twice the rate they are, right?
Yeah.
Because they're just coasting.
Right.
So, I mean, Terry's absolutely right. You got to understand the market, and you got to understand what your customers and their customers' goals are and needs are. Because how else are you going to not just serve them today, but be aware of what their needs are tomorrow?
Right.
I remember one particular customer. We were at a supplier event, and we happened to have already been working with some of their material suppliers for a couple of years on this brand new material that the customer that hosted the supplier event was starting to talk about to all their vendors, like, we need to understand how we're going to apply this material. And we were like, well, actually, here's how, we've already been doing that because we saw this, coming down the road.
Sure.
And they're like, how did you guys get the opportunity? It's like, well, we work with more than just you, and we're leveraging this information to help you. So, you got to be really aware of what's coming down the market, because you have competition. Every customer out there has competition, and that competition is going to be trying to displace you all the time.
Right.
And so you can never be asleep. You've got to be looking at what's coming down the road. How different economic situations are going to be affecting your customers and their customers, and technological innovations, how that's going to be disruptive or not, so that you're making the right choices, again, not just for today, but for tomorrow, if you want to grow and outperform the market.
Yeah.
And in answer to your question about next steps, I think, a really great next step is to call Decision Associates, and ask for Terry and I. If you're having any challenge where you perceive there may be some issues with your sales department and your sales team at any level, give us a call. Let's talk about it. Let's see how we might be able to help.
For sure. And I think, obviously we hope you call us, but even if you don't, I think one thing, it's my favorite word, is Elizabeth's favorite word, is adopting a mindset of intention with whatever you're doing. And so I think even before you start to focus on the strategy and the tactical side, it's a mindset shift of focusing on how can I be intentional about this process, about the people, about every step of what we're trying to impact. And make sure that the steps that we're taking, have purpose and are aligned with the desired results.
If you're a business leader and you're frustrated, my first piece of advice would be blame yourself first, right? And ask yourself this question: am I focused on sales management, or is my organization focused on revenue leadership? A revenue leader can be a sales manager. A sales manager is not necessarily a revenue leader.
Very true.
All these nuances that we talked about, growth rates, pricing, margin. A sales manager will be volume driven, keep the price low so I can move a bunch because I want mental wins every day.
Yeah.
Revenue leadership focuses on, am I margined right? What's the demand? Am I leaving money on the table? Should I focus on, these customers that stick versus those customers that churn? You have to have in your organization revenue leadership. That is a massive gap in small organizations.
Yes.
They say, I need a sales function. They hire a sales function and they let it go.
Ta-da!
Some of them don't even hire. They say, I'm going to use a third party.
Yeah.
And I'm going to teach them all the cool things about my product.
Right.
And I'm going to let them represent me. Right?
Yeah.
And you'll churn and burn some of these kinds of players who are basically putting you in a portfolio with a lot of other things just like you.
Yep.
And you're leaving it up to them. Right? So make sure that you have true revenue leadership in your organization. If you don't have that, you got to figure out a way to get it.
Yeah, definitely.
Or you're going to be at odds.
Mm-hmm. So some great nuggets shared here today. So I think I certainly had some aha moments as it relates to sales, because this is not a service area that I work in. So I think some really great information shared today. I love the tip of secret shopping your sales process. If you haven't done it yet, do it. It gives you some wonderful insight into where it may be broken and where you can make some tweaks. So Terry, Bill, thank you so much for joining us today on episode 10 of the Aha Moment. You can subscribe to the Aha Moment, which we highly recommend that you do, on Spotify. We are also on Instagram at the Aha Moment Pod, and we are Decision Associates on LinkedIn. You can also check out our website, decisionassociates.net. Thank you again, both of you, for joining us. And something that Elizabeth likes to do around here at the end of the episode is give ourselves a little round of applause. So nicely done, Ellen. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.